What's up, devs? In this video, I'm going to be rebuilding this stripe header. So all of what you can see on the screen above the fold except the navigation. Here's the end result. So if you stick around, by the end of it, you'll know how I built this, including the animated shader for the gradient background, the text here that has a blend mode on it so that we get kind of parts of the color showing through. We've got an animated SVG in the buttons, and it's all nicely responsive too, so we can size it down, and that's working nicely. End result is very close to the actual Stripe website. So by the end of it, you'll be able to understand how I did this and hopefully level up your skills. The code is available in my GitHub repo, which will be in the description, as well as a link to this end result so you can check it out yourselves. Hope you have a good one, and let's get started. Okay, so the plan of action will be to tackle the foreground first, then the background. The foreground will contain the text section, this bit here, it's basically the left-hand side, and then the image section on the right-hand side. And finally the logos, which are just above the fold here. So kind of grid of 8, and then move to the background and look at how we can achieve this effect up here. I'm not going to bother with the navigation. This be quite involved, but maybe topic for another video. I do like how this hover effect works. Looks really cool. So we'll notice here that we have a kind of a grid of maybe 4 columns. The markup seems a bit messy. I don't like the CSS hasn't been, it just doesn't seem to have been compressed or compiled particularly well. I'm not sure what's going on here with all of this white space, but there we go. So yeah, column layout, we've got main section here is 2 columns. When we resize it, we'll notice at a certain breakpoint, the main heading typography is scaling down. So that seems to be using a dynamic font size, like a view height or a v min or v max. And then at this breakpoint, we lose the image section entirely. So for mobile, we get that. And the logos as well down here. At a certain breakpoint, we switch from a 4-column grid to a 2-column grid. And that actually happens at a slightly different stage to the section above. I don't know if that's intentional or yeah, we'll see. Also, the image over here, the dashboard part of it, sort of gets cropped off depending on how wide the view is. So over here, we're seeing a lot more of it. On inspection, we see that there's actually two elements here. We've got the dashboard graphic and the phone graphic. The phone graphic and the dashboard graphic are both styled and written in the HTML and CSS as opposed to an image or a PNG or an SVG. I assume they've done that because they calculated that the size of these divs and accompanying styles was less than putting in an image. I'd be quite surprised if it was smaller than an SVG. Yeah, it seems odd, and like someone's had to hand write all of this stuff. It seems kind of overkill. I don't know why they've done that. It's not like any of this is interactive. Nothing happens when you scroll, so it seems like a peculiar choice, and I can only assume it's to do with the size, and they're making sort of kilobyte optimizations by doing that. But yeah, it's a bit odd that they've written all of this as HTML, but not animating it or making any of it interactive. Does make the job of recreating that rather tricky, so I'm not going to attempt that. I'm going to find some suitable placeholder images and put those in instead, but follow the same layout and phone dashboard combo that they've got here. All right, let's crack on with it then. We'll start by putting in a header. And for now, we'll make that a grid with 2 columns, width full, sticker border on it. Side of that, we'll have our left-hand section for the H1 and the paragraph or H2 beneath it. Yeah, oddly as well, they haven't used H1 tags for the, or H1 tag for this. Yeah, not really sure who was reviewing this. Oh, we've actually got 2 layers of it. Maybe that's something to do with it. Copy body is again in a div, but maybe I'll put that in a p tag. Okay, cool. There's this sort of tab, sort of mini CTA up here. That's actually 3 separate parts to it, so we can mock that up here. Is that an SVG or just a dot? It's just a large full stop by the looks of things. Copy the content out here. All right. I'm going to make the background white and the text black. Let's just add some initial sizes to the text to make it really big to begin with. Make this a little larger as well. Okay. Gonna need to add some padding. And so this seems like the center section, so from kind of this middle bit here is actually a fixed width, kind of regardless of the screen width. So we've kind of got our center content here is aligned down the middle. We don't have a dynamic padding based on the screen width. It just gets to this size, and it probably shrinks down further for mobile as well. I'm not sure if I would do it like that. All right, let's put a width full, and then we'll put a max width of say 1,000 pixels just to get started. Then I'll put a wrapper around it to align it centrally. Yeah, so now we've got that sort of same style effect. We would probably put horizontal padding on this. So we could say start padding 6. Yeah, and then we're not getting close to the edge. I'm going to stick some padding at the top here just to push down the content because it's currently beneath the nav. Okay, and then this header bit here as well, put some vertical padding on that. Maybe slightly large, slightly more. Okay, then the left section to the text section. Let's add some spacing between the elements. Maybe slightly more. I think the width of their section's actually wider than what I've put at 1,000. So it's pretty close in terms of positioning of that content. This sessions 25 section, I will put that into a flex, item center, small gap, background black 20%, rounded full, with some padding either side of it and padding top and bottom. The text will be white. Okay, so it's there. It's still rather large font size wise, so we'll do text small. We'll put width fit so that it doesn't fill its container. So it's looking more like it. The span needs to be, say, block text for Excel. It's weird, it's aligning like that. It's right down there. So the item center should have aligned it, but maybe the line height on the span is causing a problem. Sometimes makes sense to just edit things in the here, so Just looking for something that might give a clue to this. Might just need to have a negative margin on it. Nothing stands out, to be honest. It's probably actually the character itself. That's not a problem. Just using the wrong thing, aren't I? Alright, happy with that. Don't want to spend too long on a fairly inconsequential aspect. Wait, it's a bit smaller. It's even got less padding than that. Font is semi-bold. Maybe even smaller. Okay, I'll put the input in. So I assume it's a text input with the type mail. Type email, sorry. They've actually got type text, placeholder email address, some validation nearby it, an A tag to submit the form. Funny, it knows the label. Bizarre. So the input actually is beneath the button. So this entire thing is the input. So I guess that gives it the focus outline. You could put make this the form styled like that and then put the input here next to the button, but you'd have to get focus within to put a border on the form or an outline on the form. Okay, so the input, I assume, has a fixed width because it's not filling anything. So we'll put a width on it of, let's say, about 200 pixels. Stick a border, rounded full. Oh, I can't see it. Oh, it's down here. Yeah, it needs to be in this section. We'll want a placeholder. Email address, bit of padding. So the padding on the Y is the same, but the padding on the left is a smaller amount. and then it's got a large amount of padding on the right so that the button can sit on top of it. Might need to increase the width a bit. Make the form relative, and then we can stick the button as absolute and pin it to the right. And if we put the form flex and align the items in the center, we won't need to specify the top or bottom of this button. Let's make it black, rounded full. Odd that the button is. The button is inside the form. It's weird. Put the width on the form, and then make this width full. There we go. Got far too much padding over here, so we'll knock that back. I think it needs to be slightly larger, so more. Yep. Okay. Now the button label, start now. Text Y. I'm not going to put in all the exact colors. What I'm going to do is just sort of use shades of grey for now, and the border. Okay, it's closer. So I want to change the color of it on focus. So we can do focus, border, green. Oh, it's outline, maybe. Yeah, and it's on the outside, so we can space that outline offset 1, perhaps. Yeah, it's a bit better. The green is quite hard to see. Do I have any other colors in here? Just take the blue. I'm trying to find the blue, but it must be here somewhere. Let's take one of these for now. I think it's this. That actually looks too dark, but not too important right now. got a little bit of an issue with the gap here. So either we make if we make a fixed height on that input, we can know, height 12. Yeah, that's actually sorted it out, because now we've got an even spacing around the button. A little bit more padding. They've actually got a hover like effect on that icon as well. I'll put to do for that because I can't really be asked right now. Add icon and hover. Okay, that's getting there, I would say. We've kind of covered now just this CTA bit, heading, text, and an input with a button, form input. You can put a type submit on this if you want it to submit the form. We don't want the form to reload the page, so for now we can just do e.prevent default. Okay, I've got an issue because the page is server-side and it doesn't like passing the event handler into it, so I'll leave that for now. This may need to become a client component. All right, so now we have our left-hand column structured. There's a few discrepancies with the styling and colors and stuff, but yeah, we can fiddle around with that later if you want. For the images, I'm exploring the Figma community, searched flat mockup, and just want to grab a phone and tablet, or phone and desktop, which we can put in. So I'm gonna, that might do the job. What the hell? All right, I'm gonna get a light colored device. So this one, and another light colored desktop. So this one. Just delete these. Is this an image? It is an image, so I'm going to desaturate it so it doesn't clash with the color of the shader that will be added later. Just rename this phone and dashboard. These could be exported as SVGs as well. What I'll do is break. Create a duplicate in Figma, then you can do Command Option B, break it out from the component, and then there'll be some stuff in here we don't need. Like that. Now that's a bit flatter. So I can export this as an SVG now without that embedded text. Oh. ungroup that. It's a shame actually we're exporting an image inside an SVG, which we don't really want. We'd rather just have this as a gradient programmed. So yeah, let's just do that, why don't we? It's got our frame here, we can just add a linear gradient to it. Do something like that. Export that as an SVG. And I'm going to go back to here and do the same for the phone itself. That'll do. So by removing the image from the SVG, we're not having to export that image data inside the SVG, which won't be well optimized. So yeah, let's start our right-hand section, so the images section. This will take up column 2 on desktop. We'll come to the mobile sizing in a bit. Import next image component. And this will have the phone. I can't type because there's mics in my phone image. Dashboard image. Okay, let's import those. Okay, got our phone here and our dashboard beneath it. If we look on here, the phone is always positioned in the middle of these two columns. So, or in the middle of this column. You can tell by these really faint divider lines, which you probably won't be able to see. But yeah, this phone is centered and then this is off to the right. So that position the dashboard using position absolute. So I want to make this relative because it's got an absolute child. Make this absolute. And then we'll do flex and center the children. Now have a look. All right, the phone is ginormous and the dashboard is not big enough. So I'm just going to try around with some heights here. So the phone should be on top, in fact, so that should go here. I can put it on top. I think it needs a greater width than that. Yep. Make the phone bigger. The phone could actually just have height full, maybe. We'll put object contain. It's just becoming too big. I think the height full isn't working because the parent doesn't have a height on it. So if I say put this to say AT view height, that's now cropping it, but the phone still isn't, presumably because this doesn't have a height on it either. I'm going to take that off. I'm going to take a look at the dimensions that they've used. Because this doesn't actually scale at all. It just disappears. So we can set a fixed size for this. They've got 270 by 536. 270, 536. Yeah, so that's there. The dashboard needs to have maybe the height full. And then left, more margin left, say 1/3. Can we do that? No, it doesn't like that. We've actually got an offset as well on that. So to make this a lot bigger. It's not scaling the SVG, presumably it's just using its intrinsic width and height because it's setting it to 530 by 360. Just need to make it bigger. Come on, get big. That is very annoying why it's not scaling up. Thing is, it was exported at 1512, so I'm a bit stumped as to why the size of it is now tiny. Maybe I'll take off flex for a second and see if that's got something to do with it. No. All right, might need to revisit that later. So the image and dashboard are there. So the dashboard is tiny, for fuck's sake. I mean, I could just scale this, but that's just not, I would never do that really. Although it's closer now, but. Okay, so we've got the foreground content put in. Now let's take a look at the responsiveness in the next block. All right, so currently there's no apart from the width, there's not really anything responsive happening here. So if we compare that to the Stripe implementation, this left column seems to have a min width on it, because at this point it doesn't get smaller. It's pushing the phone off, and then you get to a certain breakpoint and that's completely removed. So what I do here is at a certain breakpoint we remove this section by making it hidden, or we default it to hidden, and then when the screen gets wide enough we make it visible. And we may also want to change the grid to have one column at the same breakpoint, although that's optional, I believe. So let's start by making the image hidden, and then at say medium we'll make it flex. Yeah, so we've got the image, no we don't. I think I will also change the grid columns. So we'll say at medium we've got 2, mobile we've got 1. So it just means that that text doesn't shrink so much. And then here we also want a min width of the left-hand column. We might just be able to put a min width on here. Let's just test it out. Yeah, so that's, the image isn't actually pushing over though, so perhaps we need to define that on the columns themselves. So instead of putting min width here, on the columns 2, we can, by default we've got one FR, so 2 both taking up equal space, but what we could do here is say the max of 50% or 400 pixels. The text is still behind that image though, because we're not actually scaling the text size, which we should be, because it's too big at this breakpoint. Let's reduce the font size. So if we start at say text XL and then medium, we go to, I kind of want to see what font size they've used here, because it seems to have a max size, but then as it scales down, it has different values. So we've got font size 94. Yeah, and it's actually just scaling down based on the size of it. So do we have a class that sets that? It's in vars potentially, font size. Got some funky thing going on here. All right, not gonna do that. What we can do though is, when we get too small, we could do a custom value on that and just have, say, the max of 94 pixels, or 7V max. Sorry, the min. We'd also need to set the leading to, say, snug or no, tight. It looks like 1 is about right. I think the font I'm using is appearing a bit bigger, so we'll do that and see how this looks. The letter spacing is also reduced quite a bit. So we've got something more like that. Back there, yeah, that's pretty close. So now the font size does scale down. It's going too small on mobile though, or narrow viewport, scales down. I mean, they're not actually having a different font size. I mean, maybe what we'll do is take that out for now. I mean, I'm quite happy with that. Okay, I think that covers the image bit and the responsiveness for now anyway of this section. Next bit will be this background shader. When we inspect the background, we can see how they've achieved this. So the canvas is running the shader to create this animated gradient. It's within a div which has a transform on it. So that's rotating it. So we could either, do that. And if I take off the rotation, that's the origin. Where's the actual rotation? Oh, here we are. So they've got a skew Y negative 12 degrees. So I'll put that in first and then tackle the shader afterwards. I'm going to mark up a section here for the background shader. I don't know if the canvas necessarily, I don't know if there needs to be a div beneath the canvas, to be honest with you. We could just rotate it, but go back a black background or green background, set the width to full, set it to absolute, set this to relative. The height of it, let's say we've set it at a pixel value for now. Okay, cool. So we've got it here. It needs to be a lot bigger. Probably, I mean, it could be it's not actually dynamically sized on their site. So we could just set it to a higher value. And that looks pretty close. Let's put it to top 0, left 0, right 0. Okay, cool. Now we can put the skew on it. So style, transform. Like that. So that's the angle. And it also will need a Y translation. To push it up even more than that. What we can do is just put a negative top value so that it goes out of bounds at the top. Okay. I mean, that looks pretty close. We've got, it's almost exactly the same, lovely jubbly. So the content over the top, that will need to be relative so that it fits over it like that. The text itself has an effect on it as well, which we can add now. So see here, it's blending with the background. Yeah, so that they've got 2 layers, and this one has mixed blend color burn on it. I don't know if there is a Tailwind for mixed blend color burn. There is. Okay, so now that's actually giving us the effect here. Okay, so we've got the layout almost there, I'd say. Need to fix the sizing on the dashboard image and add the logos below, but it's working as it should in terms of responsiveness. So that's good. Okay, so we need a way to load a shader into our canvas. And I've come across GLSL Canvas, which is a TypeScript way of easily loading these shaders. So I'm going to install this package, which I've just done. In our page, we're going to want a ref on our canvas. So we're going to move this out of our main page. And I've created a GLSL canvas component. So we've got our canvas in here. Now I've put a ref on it. Made this a mark as client side. And I've imported the GLSL canvas.js canvas, some options, which will be a type. So now what we can do is, as the component mounts, we can then initiate this. Now what we have is a red canvas, and if we adjust the color here, we should expect to see a different color, which we do. Just looking for a fragment shader. Okay, so this one is using the uniform here. Let's just copy this one, see if it works. Okay, cool. Well, we have access to the time. We don't need the mouse. But that's a start. At least we know now we can work on some shader code to get that functioning properly. Size of the canvas has gone a little off. So on that. Okay, cool. I'm going to take a break and see where I can get to in reproducing something a little bit more like this using their colors. Okay, I've played around with the shader code for about 30 to 60 minutes and have ended up with this. I took the color gradients from the stripe canvas wrapper. So if we locate that here, you see that we've got these 4 different colors here. So these seem to be the values that they're using in the shader. You also notice that at points in there's like a kind of a sharper line here. You get this kind of sine wave effect that's moving over it, and that sharpens variously in different places. So I've kind of attempted to recreate that here. As you can see, we've got a kind of wave effect, and then in points we get a kind of sharper edge that blurs in and out. And it doesn't look exactly the same. I think there's still work that could be done, but it's not far off and it still looks pretty cool in its own right. So I'll dive into the code there and show you how that works. Got the fragment shader and the vertex shader. So the vertex shader isn't doing anything except passing the UV coordinate as a varying into the fragment shader. I'm using this extension which provides the syntax highlighting, so GSL literal, and yeah, if you're using it in your inline JavaScript, then define it like this and it will sort out the code highlighting. I went and got a simplex noise function from online. So grabbed it from GLSL noise here, Patricio Gonzalez. That simplex noise function has just been pasted in at the top. Then we've got our gradient colors, which I converted into vector4 values so they can be used in the shader. I also named them just so it was a bit clearer to tell what they were rather than just 1, 2, 3. There's not tons of code here, but essentially playing around with it, I created a few time variables that have different multipliers applied to them. And then I created 3 noise values which multiply the UV value by different values. So in fact, this is times 0.25. We'll use the same syntax. And then they're normalized to return a value between 0 and 1. So we've got these noise values which will create a kind of smooth gradient between 0 and 1 with quite a bit of randomness built into them. And then basically mixing the colors using the noise values to create a color A and a color B. So if we look at what color A is by itself, so this is color A, and it mixes yellow with purple using noise A, and then it mixes the result of that with blue using noise C. And then for color B, same thing, except this one uses blue and yellow, and then peach as the prominent color. And then I've created a sine wave, which we can look at here, but basically the x value is multiplied so that we can see the wave. Time is added so that it moves, and then it's been offset by the y so that it moves down, because otherwise it wasn't really that visible. So if I take out, actually, if I just show you just the wave, if we just mixed, say, black and white, you can see how that looks. So here we've got the sine wave that's moving along, and you'll notice how it's sharper in points here, and then that will move to more blurry. Other points will become sharper. And achieved that by smoothing the result. So if I take off the smooth step, so now we've got just the wave, which has a bit of noise added to it, and that's what gives it that slightly uneven shift. So if I take out the noise, what we'll see now is a more kind of perfect wave, like so. So adding the noise in there, kind of gives it that slightly more organic movement to it. And then in order to create the sort of the sharp edge that oscillates between sharp and blurry, I have created a smooth step value, which normally would say smooth between two static values, but then I'm using the noise value, clamping the noise value and minusing from it so that it will have a bias towards 0. So when 0 and 0 is here, we just end up with a sharp edge. There's no smoothing. And then we got 0 and 1, we have like fully soft. And so when this value's low, we get the sharper edge. And because the noise value changes from 0 to 1, we're then minusing value from it, so it will always be in the range of negative 0.2 and 0.8, and that just means that we're more likely to see the 0 value, so the sharper edge here. I mean, I could actually multiply this again to increase it slightly, like that. Yep, and so then that mix wave value is used to blend the two colors, so color A and color B. So when we mix the two of them together, instead of the black and the white, then we kind of end up with this layered wavy gradient. not fully happy with the noise in places. It seems like it's too intense, perhaps. Maybe that looks a bit better. Yeah, so the shader code is in place now and ready to move on to the next section. So I want to sort out a few things here. The Sessions 2025 needs to have a transparent background. It's also a little bit too big. I need to get the mix blend working properly on the heading text. The input seems a little bit small, color's a bit too dark, and then obviously we need to get the dashboard image large enough so that it's extending over here. It must be being constrained to the container it's within. It doesn't seem to be getting any larger than that. So take a look at these points, take off the borders and add in the logo section below, and then we are almost there. So I'll start by removing the borders. That needs a border, but can have a lower opacity. Yep. Image section, can get rid of that border, maybe put overflow visible. Set the min height to screen on this just so we don't have that black below. Let's update the early bird registration section. So rather than background black, so we'll put it on 40. Looks about right. Could have extra small font. Also maybe a backdrop blur, medium. Okay, we are getting closer. The form field needs to be a bit wider to give some more room for typings. So what we got, width 80. Width 88 isn't valid. It's 96. Yep. Could do with a little bit more padding on the button, on the X. Okay, sweet. Well, that's good enough for now. The dashboard image is too small though, so we're gonna have to debug what's going on there. Is it something to do with its container, is what I'm wondering. We've got our grid, we've got the first column, second column. I wonder if I put the dashboard outside of there and just stick it to grid or cold start 2. Yeah, and then underneath that. Okay, so now it is actually massive. Just fix the issue of its sizing, but we don't want it to be that big. I think we want a height of, say, 500. It does need to be absolute inside of that cell because it's sitting beneath this one. Let's try and figure out the correct height for this. It's about 570 height. The width should be set automatically. Set the bottom to 0 and the left to 0. It doesn't seem to be in that grid. Is it because the grid isn't relative? Yeah. And we need to start in column 2 like we had before. Okay. It's still now sizing it down significantly inside that cell. Okay, I think it's something to do with the width, max width. So if we put a max width of max, now we've got our larger image. So take the background off it. Okay, we do need it to be shifted up and right. Potentially also a bit bigger. That's way bigger, so let's do 980. Oh, fuck. Yeah, that's about right. So rather than bottom 0, we'll do bottom 16, and rather than left 0, we can put a left value, say 48. Move it over some more. It's quite nice how the background color comes in here, and perhaps actually because they've used backdrop blur, potentially that's why they've coded that. Okay, now let's do the grid of icons below. So we've got same kind of sizing on the grid in that it has a max, this container has a max width. So what we can do is create another section. I'll probably just use the same grid classes that we defined here and then adjust them. Like we don't need to mess around with that. We actually want 4 columns though, and two on mobile, 4 on desktop. Let's put a border so we can see it. Okay, I'm inside. Oh, this needs to be flex call. Yeah, all right, so we've got a little section here for those brand icons. Now I would either rip these, well, these are all SVG, so you either have to download these or, yeah, probably need to download them to be honest. So in Figma, what I'll do, I'll inspect these and then I can copy the SVG code directly into Figma. You know, you're doing pretty well if you've got OpenAI, Amazon, Google, all as your customers. Wait, that's weird, it's not got a color. Odd, none of these have the color. Why is that, I wonder? They're not using variables, are they? Oh, they do have a var on that. So they've passed in a variable as the fill. I don't know what was the point of that. Just to make my life difficult. I'm just going to put them in as they come in through here. Okay, so we've got these now ready to go in our grid of 8. I think we are missing one though. Airbnb. So actually, you notice they've kind of sized the SVG so that they're all exactly 200 by 40. That would have been done in the design tool. Can we neaten this up a bit? All right, let's quickly label these then. It's always better to label them in Figma before you export them, otherwise you're having to rename files. Plus, if you then make a change to one of these, you don't want to have to remember what you called it last time. So I'll quickly add the names. Urban. Okay, so now these can be exported in a batch as SVGs. Be cool to have these brands on your customer list maybe one day. If you work for one of these companies, hit me up. Now what I can do is probably just create a constant of the brand icons, which will be of type static image data, which is the Next.js import type for images. And then we're going to import, we want OpenAI, Amazon, Google. So Shopify, Anthropic, Airbnb and Urban. Hopefully those are all correct. So now we put these in here. Oh, come on. And then I'll just map that into an array of next images where the source and index can be used. Index is the key. Missing an alt. Do we have something on this sort? No, we don't have anything. So what we should do here is actually update this to include the name as part of this. So what we'd have is source like this and then alt or name as a string. Like that. And then when we map the logo, we can just do logo.name as the key, logo.name as the alt. All right, so now we've got these 7, but one is missing for some reason. Oh, Marriott. Okay. And the correct order is open Amazon, Google, Anthropic, open Amazon, Google, Anthropic, and then we've got Marriott, Shopify, Airbnb, Urban. Okay, so they're in place. Now this grid here could do with some gap. So let's just say gap 8. Maybe we only need the gap on the vertical. So if we want to do that, we'll just do gap Y, say 12. That looks a bit better. We can also say that we want to place content center, which I think, yeah, that centers them. Okay, I can take off that border. Maybe PY12 is a little bit too much. Getting close. Now the responsive update, let's check how that works. Yeah, so it's switching that point nicely. The SVG has 2 states. So there's this hover arrow. It's not visible because it doesn't have the correct color, and this button also needs to be flexed. So it's in there, but the fill needs to say be white. Okay, so now it has appeared. We want to put a gap on this so that it's not touching. And as the SVGs mess with the padding, we'd keep it something like that. 2 on the right, 4 on the left. So their hover arrow. Can I simulate that being hovered? I know you can do that here. Doesn't change anything. Still not changed. Makes me think perhaps they're using JavaScript to change the SVG. Also, the SVG I've copied doesn't look right either. And paste it into Figma and see what we get out. Yeah, okay. So there is a line there, but for some reason this isn't displaying properly, but we do have a line and a vector. So this I'm guessing one of these is the triangle, so probably this is probably the point head. What if we put a line in? So it starts at x and y 1, 5, 5. So we don't want that. We want it to start at x0, y 4 or 5, and then x2 will be, let's just say 10, and this can stay at 5. Right, so now we can see a straight line through there. We can put the stroke width to 2. We don't want it to be quite that long, so we can adjust the x endpoint. Make it like that. And then if we put group on the button, when we do hover, what we should be able to do, don't need that group. What we should be able to do is affect its opacity. So if I put class name and then group hover and then do opacity 100 or opacity 0 by default. So now we can get our button fading in, the arrow fading in. Let me zoom in on this one so you can see. So we've got the dash is coming in now, but the head needs to move along. So what we can do again is class name on that. And when it's hovered, so group hover again, translate x by say 2. Okay, that's too much. That is sort of there. Okay, so I've got it translating on the hover, but it needs to transition the opacity so that fades in. And then we also need to transition the transform so that slides across. We may also want a slightly smaller gap. And obviously a hover color on the background. Hover background. Okay. Okay, it's a new day, some new challenges. The text here is too faint. We need to work out how to get the dark layer showing here whilst still having the color burn version on top. So if we inspect the stripe site, there's actually a third heading layer. So there's two over the top, one which has color burn, one which has a reduced opacity. If we delete these, so now we can see that there's actually a third layer, which is the H1 tag. So as mentioned at the start of the video, I wasn't sure why they'd use divs, but it's because you can only have one H1 and they've used that actually at the top underneath the canvas. So what we need to work out how to do is how to use the same styling and place it beneath here. I believe that Stripe are using absolute positioning, but I think we can achieve it in a different way. So yeah, let's crack on and fix this little issue here then. So we've got our canvas here. So what we'll want to do is put another layer beneath it. So layer beneath the canvas. And we want it to be positioned exactly the same as this left column. So what I'm going to do to begin with is I'm going to copy this and put it here. Close off the tags, put it as absolute. So that is there, but we're obviously doubling up on this sessions tag, which we don't need. And also we only want one H1. So we could change this to the span element. Which has affected its styling for some reason. We also want to take out this. If I put the canvas opacity down, this might make it a bit easier to see what's going on. Okay. Now, because I've removed this sessions piece, the heading has moved up because that was previously taking up the space. So what I want to do is put some padding at the top here to push that back down. It's actually kind of hard to see what's what. That. So yeah, we need to move it up higher. This span has caused some issues. I wonder if it's to do with the block. Here we are. Okay. Because by default, spans are inline elements. Now, this is not quite right. If I put more padding, it's coming down. But I think what I'd do here is, if we just define a fixed height on this element, say it's too much, height 7. So we know that this is taking up 7 height before our heading. So up here, we just need to make sure that there's 7 space. Actually, let's try doing it differently and let's put margin top 7. It's not quite right. Is it to do with the positioning of that? No. I've got PL6 here. Let's make the text red for now. On top. Okay, so we need to push it down more, that black layer beneath it. Space white 8, but it hasn't got anything to space between it, so actually we need to do 8 plus 7 in order to line it up. So they match up now because we've got even spacing here. Now I think that works, although this sessions is too large. So if sessions was height 6, actually that looks more like the source anyway. And then I can drop this down by 2. Yeah, okay, cool. So now if I set the color of this overlay layer back to how it should be. Okay, sweet. So that's solved that issue. I'm going to update this text section to have a X padding instead of just a left padding. Well, notice actually we've got quite a few sort of duplicated classes now, class lists. So this grid section here, this is all exactly the same. So I think what I'll do is cut that out and create a class for it. And then if we do want to tweak any of those values, we don't need to remember to do it in both places. So this one is exactly the same. Probably go through in a bit and actually make some more code improvements if there's any other issues like that. Okay, nice. So now that is looking more like how it should. We're seeing the colors come through here, but we still have our strong bottom section appearing. What else can we do in the code then to clean this up a bit? The class names on the heading text are another one that are duplicated. So let's say this set here, the sizing, we could pull that out. We don't actually want color burn on that version. I use Tailwind join to join in the main style with the margin top here. Okay, still looking right. Copy that onto our span. With our span, we're going to add the block isolate and the color burn. Okay, so now if I want to tweak the heading 1 class, I can just change it up here. Leading 1 is actually just leading none. Okay, that's good. All right, let's take a look at the code and see if there's any other improvements we can make before we move on to a couple of finishing touches. I call these brand icons, which isn't really accurate. They should be called brand logos. Switch that out. So I'm looking for code that's duplicated. The header grid here, we actually have a grid width full max width 1080, and we've got that down here as well. So I could pull that out and then up here have like a grid width class or something. And then this one can extend that. So all this is the same. So could just insert that like that. And then down here where we've got where we had our logos, we put that in. Now, if we want to make it wider, we should just be able to change this one value here, and everything updates. Okay. So I think that's all right for the code at the moment. On the Stripe site, there is this hover with the arrow up here. So we've got the same SVG with hover effect that's used in the button. So what we can do is just extract this arrow icon out into its own little component. Like so. Now we'll put that arrow icon inside sessions here. We need to add a hover to this part of it. So that's an anchor tag here. We'll need to assign that as the group, and then I think we'll have, say, hover opacity 60. Let's make it flex and item center with a small gap. We also need a cursor pointer on that. Okay, that's better. There's now too much padding on the right, so we'll change this to padding left 3, padding right 1, padding right 2. Okay, that's those done. I think what I'm going to do now is actually fix up the SVG, because I don't like this sharp triangle that is currently in there. So I'm going to sort that out in Figma now. Okay, so I can use the material plugin to grab a chevron, and it's quite a thick one. we need it to be in two parts because we won't. Yeah, so we could do something like this perhaps. Let me see what the right arrow looks like. Need something that sits nicely. These are all kind of uneven. This bounding box. Really, I just want the element, the shape from within it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. Half, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that looks about right. Once this is moved over here, we've got our arrow. So we could have SVG that looks like that, but this will start centered like so, and this line will begin transparent. So let's see how this works. If I set it to white, export it as an SVG. Fly back over to the code. So comment out that for now. The view box is 8080, but obviously we don't want our size to be 8080. I think what we can just do is change the width and height of it. Yeah, so now we've got a much nicer looking arrow in here. What if we put the size up a little bit? Yeah, that is a lot better. So now the rectangle will have class name opacity 0. We can basically copy the transition and hover that we had previously. So that's fading in, and then we'll add the X translation to the arrowhead. Probably want to translate it to maybe 3 now. I think the yeah, the rectangle's not quite long enough for the. There's a small section in there that you can kind of see coming through. So what we can do there is try increasing the width of it. Yeah, so that works. I'd actually probably say we could begin by translating this -1. That gives it a bit more movement, maybe even -2 as its initial state. Yeah, cool. Let's see how it looks up here. Just want to make sure that both of those have the same duration. Okay, could delete the old SVG. Okay, covered those off. I do like how you get to see some of the background of the gradient up here, whereas this SVG that we've got here doesn't do that. So I think instead of that image, actually, I'm going to swap that here for just a div with a div inside of it. So if I take the same class, we'll remove the dashboard image and we'll set the height to 580 pixels and the width to 920 pixels. Take that off. Take that off, and then if we put another div inside it, what we're going to do on this one is we'll put a background white 20 or 30 with a backdrop blur small. Not seeing anything now. Okay. Odd that it's changed the position, but I think we want in about that position. Let's just round it, large or XL to XL. Go back to the white background. So we've got our frosted glass effect over the top. And then this div here can basically fill it, background white, but say a margin, see how margin top 16 looks. Margin left 32. Maybe a bit more. Make sure this has overflow hidden on it. Then we can round the left top, rounded, is it TL? Yeah, rounded TL to XL. Just push it over a little bit more. Nice, okay. Then finally add a little shadow to this. In fact, that doesn't have a backdrop blur because the line is sharp through it. Looks more like that. Okay, that's looking a lot better. Be nice to get a shadow under the image as well. Sorry, the image of the phone. And in fact, the shadow could do with being softer on the dashboard. So that looks about right. in order to put the shadow on here, if we just do shadow to XL, it's putting it on the box of the image, even though the image is, I believe it's an SVG. So either we put the shadow in the SVG, or we can use a filter here instead of a box shadow. So I think we do something like this, where we specify the XY and then the blur amount and then the color. I can't really see that. Okay, so it's filter drop shadow, not filter shadow. But that's still not worked. Actually, the reason is these commas shouldn't be there. These should be spaces, I think. Still got an issue. So that filter hasn't actually come up at all. Let's see if it's something to do with Tailwind. No. All right, it had worked, it just wasn't visible. I'm just going to test if it was working here all along. No, so that's not the right syntax for doing it in Tailwind. Soften this a little bit. Knock it down a few more pixels. Okay, that's looking better. I think we should probably change the exact color of that shadow, make it slightly off black, but it's just looking good. There's a little bit too much vertical padding up here. And I think the text, the main heading, has a bit more leading or kind of line spacing on it. So where we've got leading none, maybe we do 1.1. And then we can reduce the vertical padding on the header grid class. So this has got PT 40. Now, how's that look? Yeah, that's much closer. The background on the sessions piece is too dark, so I'm going to knock that down. Okay, happy with that. So the final bit here are these vertical lines. See, here we've got a line on the left, can't actually scroll, and then 3 central dashed lines, 1, 2, 3, and then a line on the right hand side. These are actually repeated down across all of the sections. They do scroll with the content, so it's like they're within each of the relevant sections. So in order to do that, we need it to be beneath the canvas, because obviously we don't want it on top of it. So I'm thinking we have our layer beneath the canvas, which has the grid class, and the grid class is the right width for those lines. So potentially we could put something in here for those dashed lines. So the header grid has 2 columns. So inside each column will have 2 blocks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we can put borders to the left and right of them. Maybe a better way to do this. But let's try and get something that works. So create an absolute box, size it, and then in here we'll just put a border 3, border black. Put size full on it. It's not seeing anything just yet. Let's put a background on it as well. Okay, so it's actually just here, so it's not going to be able to span the full height unless we set the height of this to full. I mean, it maybe need to just put those lines in their own section actually. Do it here. So if we do width size full, absolute background green. Okay, so that's filling that whole section there. Now what we'll want to do is actually make this background white, but for now specify a different color. And then if we put the header grid classes on this one as well, it's got padding. In fact, maybe we don't, maybe we just want the grid width class, not that one. Because this has relative on it, we need to use, we really need to use Tailwind merge to so that the relative class is overwritten by the absolute one here, or we just take out relative from here. Probably, and could just put it in here. So yeah, we've got this bit here now. So this is centered. It's not taking up the full height though, which is odd. And I wonder if it's because this isn't taking up the full height. Yeah. Okay, so I've got this layer beneath our canvas, which has a section where the grid lines can go and the heading text here. And it's using the same width and we'll then put the same grid columns on it as well. So I wonder if we do actually want to use this, though we just don't want any padding on it. So I think what I'll do is I'll just do grid cos 4. Now in here, just put in the 4 divs, and on those we'll have a size full border L, border R. Now if I take off the background color here, we can see these. I'll make them larger for sake of recording. So we've got those there. Now we need the ones on the outer side to be solid and the ones in the middle, these 3, to be dashed. So this one on the left hand side will just have a border left. It's that one there. That'll be solid. This one will have both sides and this will be dashed. So now I've got those 2. The third one doesn't need a left border because that's covered by that one and is dashed. And then this one will just have a border right. So now we've got the 4 grid lines here. There's no padding on them like we have elsewhere. So we do have X padding here, but because this is absolute, it's ignoring that. And we need it to be absolute to sit behind our header. So we'd need to put padding X5 on that as well. So the padding doesn't really come into effect until it gets small. I know it is working correctly, I think. That point here, we're going to split to 2 columns though, and we'll get rid of one of the inner divs. So we could say this one's hidden. When it's medium, it's block. Yeah, and then the columns will be 2 until it's medium, and then it'll be 4. Something's not right. Oh yeah, because we only actually want 2 elements in here. I think if we just review the Stripe one, they actually only have the outer lines. They don't have the middle line because it would be kind of cutting through the text too much. So we can get rid of the other central div. Start that hidden. Now that looks right. These lines aren't lining up quite right. We should have padding here between the text, but it's exactly in line with where our text is. So even though that has the padding on it, I think that's the issue actually. Yeah, now it's in the right place. But when we get too small, we're losing those because there's no spacing for it now. So what we can say is let's put the padding on it only when it's small. Yeah, okay. All right. So those lines are now in place and they follow down. We need to get a good color for them. I'm curious as to where they've actually put them. So I may just delete a load of this stuff and try and find them. Not finding the color here, so I'm just going to use a really light gray for it. I need to update all of these. So border, something faint. Maybe about that. Yeah, that's looking good. So we've got a dash line down here, a couple in the middle, and off to the side. It looks like slightly too much padding. We've got that PX5, but it's pretty close. Maybe just slightly less on the text section. Okay, nice. Happy with this. I think that pretty much wraps it up. If I was going to animate it, could put some sort of transitions in on here. Maybe do something on scroll. Could also consider doing something with the mouse position in the shader. Kind of use some sort of repulsion or traction to affect the UV values and the kind of positions of the gradients. That would be cool. Obviously, we've not hooked up the form. We've not hooked up this link here either. But we've built the Stripe header in a few hours, and yeah, it's pretty close to the source. Oh, we do have a slight issue I've discovered here. So what's causing that? Oh, because this should have PX5 on it. Yeah, because this layer here is essentially the same as this. Should have the same classes. So where we've got FlexCol PX5 here, we also need to put it on both layers to make sure it matches up. Great. Okay. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you made it this far, yeah, appreciate you, and see you in the next one.